The future belongs to the curious. This is an act of discovery. Come and experience it with us in Aracad and discover your creative potential. This is your path. This is your journey. You decide how it's going to be. Time to free your curiosity that's always in you. Come and experience it with us in Aracad and discover your creative potential.
I think we are online now, and
yes, we are.
We are okay. Thank you very much, and you are welcome, dear academic students and participants. We are having a webinar today with Professor Dr. Nur Sözen. She's going to give us a presentation titled "From Past to Present Sustainability." Dear Professor Sözen, welcome, and thank you very much for accepting to give us a presentation today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
How are you? How is everything?
Fine, thank you. Thank you. It's nice to be with you together.
Thank you very much. You have been always a best professor, best teacher, best person for me in my life and in my academic life. And first of all, I would like to thank you very much for your kindly contribution to my studies as well. And before starting our presentation, I would like to explain a little about your studies and about your challenging works in your life. And so Professor Dr. Nur Sözen, she graduated from Ankara University Faculty of Agriculture, Department of Horticulture in 68. From 67 to 68, she worked as English, German, Turkish translator at a private engineering company. From 68 to 69, she served as a research assistant at Ministry of Agriculture in Ankara. From June 69 to September 71, she worked as a science teacher and head of science department at St. John's Regional School in Australia. After coming back to Turkey until July 72, she worked for Ankara Municipality Department of Parks. And from 72 to 77, she worked as research and teaching assistant at Ankara University, Department of Landscape Architecture. She completed her PhD in 77 and continued working at the same department. After becoming associate professor, she served at the same department, but also worked for Gazi University for the departments of architecture and town and country planning from 82 to 88. In 88, she was appointed as a full professor. From December 89 to December 95, she served as the head of Landscape Architecture Department in Ankara University, where she established the AutoCAD and GIS labs. From 88 to 96, she was responsible for coordinating international relations of Ankara University. In 91, she acted as network director and coordinator of Med Campus project. In 92, she worked for the distance education in Asia and Pacific projects. She received Soka University Honorary Award for her contributions in 92. From 93 to 95, she worked as local director of Environmental Management Master Degree Program. In 96, she retired from Ankara University and continued working in EU and GM projects. From 2009 to 2016, she worked for the European University of Lefke at the Department of Landscape Architecture. From 2021, she's one of the academic staff in Arukat in northern Cyprus. She's currently working as a reviewer for some academic journals, mostly Elsevier's Ecological Indicators journal. She has several international publications, especially in the field of environment, ecology, and sustainability. Thank you very much for your kindly accepting for the presentation. Now I will ask you to start your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Çetinkaya. And for your compliments also, I have to thank you. It's my pleasure to be with you and with your students as well. So I cannot see my present. Yeah, now it's okay. I will start now. Yeah, today, first of all, it is my pleasure to be with all your students. I hope something can remain after my presentation in their minds about sustainability. So sustainability is a very fashionable word. As a matter of fact, sustaining something for a long time is not possible. When we understand, what we understand from sustainability is to sustain whatever we have and to improve it also. Is it possible? I don't think it is possible.
I think it's very hard to do it.
It is, indeed. I will try to show a different aspect of the whole thing and how it is related to other subjects. Next, please. Yeah, here, as you see, climate action and sustainable development are inseparable. How so? Because climate action is so much related to sustainability and sustainable development because it covers all the actions we are taking against climate change. Well, then we have to think one more because climate change is inevitable, like any other change. Change is continuous issue. Everything changes. The world changes. The universe changes. Everything changes. But sustainability would mean its ability to adapt ourselves and our lifestyles to changing conditions coming from climate change. As a matter of fact, climate action, which is against climate change, is one form of sustainability. It is such a concept that asks us to see the big picture of what we are taking from the earth and how our actions affect future generations. A warming planet is a major challenge for sustainability because then if it is warming, really warming and alarming levels, then we will have to change everything in accordance with sustainability tasks, targets. So human activities inevitably contribute to climate change, which are not sustainable at all. Our activities cannot be considered sustainable. Not in the past, not at present. I don't know what happens in the future. We keep altering the planet, but we don't think we are depending on these resources the planet provides. So climate change also makes everything so hard to find sustainable solutions to various problems. Shifting biodiversity and shifting climatic conditions affect our food sources, rise sea levels, and the way we design our cities and buildings. A warming earth will make it harder to grow enough food. So to grow enough food to feed the people, we'll have to cut the forests. And when we cut the forests, then we contribute further to climate change. Next, please. Next, yes. Well, then, sustainability is to be considered as a balancing act. which aims to provide enough resources for people to live healthy lives without compromising the future of humanity. So we need to look at it through an ecological framework. We need to think that useful definition of sustainability in mind. As we work on solutions to climate change, we can get closer to sustainability. Very often we hear talks about solar panels, recycling, biking. Yes, they are nice, they look nice. But unless governments, communities, and businesses take necessary actions, such personal acts has no meaning at all for sustainable system. So sustainability should involve people and the environment, and extraction from the nature, disposal of the waste, and how humans interact with the whole thing. From an environmental perspective, sustainability is concerned with the resources we take from the earth and how we use them. Next slide, please. Well, then let's have an example. As we all know, Earth is approximately 4.6 billion years old. We can liken it to a person of 46 years of age. We know nothing about the first 7 years, the childhood time. We have no idea about it. At the age of 42, here and there, some forms of life started appearing. So many years lost already, huh? Dinosaurs and other great reptiles did not appear until the age of 45. Mammals arrived only 8 months ago. In the middle of last week, man-like creatures started appearing. At the weekend, the last ice age, modern man has been around only 4 hours, for 4 hours. During the last hour, agriculture has been discovered. Industrial revolution, on the other hand, began just a minute ago. Well, it is frightening, isn't it? In that 1 minute, what have we done to our planet? Next slide, please. So it's very hard to talk about sustainability, isn't it? Because in such a small amount of time, we destroyed everything. Now we are trying to find solutions what we have destroyed, huh? Because it is not the problem of the earth. It is our problem. Nothing happens to earth. It can continue somehow, but we will disappear with all other forms of life. So if sustainability is considered as a solution, to achieve this goal, a different approach is required. We have to change everything. The focus from traditional economy to ecology. And then become aware that our existence as human depends on the existence of other species and also life-supporting systems and substances. We must try to understand the limits and carrying capacity of our planet. This is the only life island in the whole universe so far known. Remember, we are not the only inhabitants of this planet. Next slide, please. Well, according to UNCED report, this is United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, which is a very famous report, also called Brundtland Report, after the name of the Swedish Prime Minister at that time at 1992 Rio World Summit. Sustainable development is the development that meets the needs of present, our generation, without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Okay, good, but we are consuming everything, leaving nothing for the future generations, as a matter of fact. According to Bartlett, on the other hand, which is a very well-known scientist, sustainability has to mean a long time period comparing to our lives. Our lives are short. But sustainability has to mean very long period of time. But things cannot go on for such periods of long time. It's impossible without changing. So change is inevitable. As I told at the beginning, sustainability depends on our ability to adapt ourselves to the changes. Next, please. Well, perhaps sustainable development or sustainability, just an oxymoron. Maybe, because the demands always grow faster than the revenue. Population growth never pays for itself. Constructing more highways is not a solution. Allowing heavier trucks reduces the truckers' costs by shifting these costs to the public. Interesting, isn't it? Next slide, please. There must be something we can do. Widen our perspective of life. Become more responsive to the environment and ecological processes, especially ecological processes, not only environment, how the processes are carried. Learn from the natural world and must understand our interdependence with all other forms of life. Remember, bees, if bees disappear from the Earth's surface, we won't live very long. We must work in harmony with the world that sustains us and discover life's self-organizing elegance, life cycles, vital flows, and relations. So radical change is needed in our classical attitude. At the moment, I am not sure where we are standing in terms of sustainability, in the middle or some other places. And are we moving towards sustainability or backwards? I don't know. It's a huge question I have in mind. Next, please. Well, according to McCark, there are so many regulations and laws to protect public against possible harms of, as listed here, processed food, smoking, alcoholism, drug addiction, robbery, assault, etc. But there are either none or very weak and flexible laws and regulations to protect the same public against the hazards of flood, earthquake, landslide, global warming, depletion of ozone layer, air, water, soil contamination, loss of agricultural soils, etc. So somebody, while protected from robbery by law, can easily die in a flood because the construction always carried on hazard-prone areas. Next slide, please. On the other hand, there are some regulations, of course. There always has been some regulations, but these cannot stop settlements and industry. How beautiful they are, it doesn't matter. They cannot stop settlements and industry or other related uses spreading over ecologically sensitive and even unique areas. In general, whether sustainable or not, development is understood as superiority of human over the nature and its forces. So we must understand we are nothing but the other creatures on the earth. Traditional economic approach considers the nature and environment as a uniform commodity, but it's not uniform. It has a great diversity as a function of ecological features and processes. Next slide, please. Next, please. Yeah. So we must understand and accept unsustainable solutions, especially coming from the politicians, cannot help because it requires science. Development means making plans for natural and rural areas for economic purposes, which are followed immediately by heavy constructions. Well, as settlements develop or expand, supply and distribution of services and utilities create difficulty more than ever. Waste disposal or treatment create more problems and require more money. Multi-story buildings replace smaller ones to accommodate more people. We are seeing it everywhere. Huh? A new, less dense suburban settlements, a new network of engineering structures occupy the rural and agricultural land. Next, please. Well, then a time came for awakening. From Stockholm, 1972, to Rio, 1992. As you can see, 20 years between them. So the representative of the governments came together to find a solution for coming disasters and to repeat it every 20 years. During this 20 years period, there has been a lot of discussions, but no solid actions. A lot of talks, a lot of papers, piles of papers. There were no computer used then. Everything was written on paper, huge files and papers and everything. A lot of meetings, but no solution. I can only say the whole thing was focused on understanding the problem, identifying the problems, cooperation and communication, and cleaning environment were still no answer for that, making related legal arrangements, and control and managerial issues. Well, but during 1980s, economy and market instruments gained priority, such as preventions, taxes, permissions, pricing policies, mass media, consumer demands, data gathering and evaluating. But then, unfortunately, the money-related items here, like taxes, permissions, pricing policies, and even preventions, interpreted as such a stupid, sorry for saying that, principle, such as polluter pays. There is no such thing. The people interpreted it. You can pollute as long as you can pay. That was such a silly interpretation of this market instruments. Next slide, please. Then came Earth Summit in 1992. This time, discussions concentrated on a little bit more detailed subjects, such as globalization, biological diversity, global climate change, standards, parameters, and indicators for quality of life and sustainability, which are important as far as I am concerned. Agenda 21, legal and economical arrangements, reduce consumption, risk management, life cycle analysis, holistic or integrated approach, strategical planning, EU action plans and frameworks, NGOs, non-government organizations, local authorities, collaboration, cooperation, dialogue, transparency. Well, it looks nice, doesn't it? But if it worked, it's a huge question. Next slide, please. Well, on the other hand, the people living on the earth are not the same kind. Huh? There are so many different groups, countries, traditions, and everything. So expectations from sustainable development are different, especially for the developed and developing world. There has been a lot of discussion that developing world was against sustainability because they said we keep being poor and you keep being rich. So this is a terrible debate still ongoing. And even within the same group, there are so many different ideas, opinions, approaches, and nature. According to 1992 Rio Summit and Agenda 21 targets, the measure of sustainable development is no more explained in terms of consumption per capita, but it was like that in the future. The more you consumed, the better you lived, and it was something prestigious.
But it's capitalism, maybe we can say.
Yeah, exactly. that was sort of thing that offer you everything. If you have money, you can consume as much as you want, and the rate of your consumption shows at a very high level life. You are having a good life. But rather, it's to be measured in parameters that indicate the new concepts, such as quality of life. It's no more measured by the consumption per capita and the resilience. And there are more. At the beginning of the third millennium, efforts seem to concentrate on long-term strategical planning, but again, it is a frame, inside is empty, according to me. And changing the focus from human-centered attitude to life-centered attitude, ecological approach we have to adopt. But how? Nobody knows. We are so selfish. We keep talking, we keep writing nice things, but solid action, solid solution, I don't see. Next slide, please. Developed and developing countries have different attitudes. I told you. Developed countries identify the problems. They use information technologies, scientific methods, etc. Establish operational relations between the economical and ecological systems, define and determine the changing meaning and content. The meaning is changing, and contents and dimensions of the problems. Prepare and implement efficient programs to cope with greenhouse gases, etc. These are 5R programs, such as reduction, replacement, recovery, reuse, recycle, define indicators of sustainability. And they expect the developing countries do the same. Is it possible?
It's not possible.
You see? Next slide, please. On the other hand, developing countries have so many problems, facing so many problems. I am not going to detail these problems here, but they try to produce environmental and sustainable development policies, spend efforts to integrate environmental and sustainable development policies with reform processes, which is a very delicate issue, privatization, rural reforms, economical instruments. These are very important, but also delicate and sometimes dangerous issues for the politicians, for the government leaders. Try to understand their responsibilities resulting from international cooperation, because international cooperation is sort of brings them such responsibilities they cannot handle. Despite their efforts, legal arrangements are likely to remain on paper. Either they are too weak, too sophisticated, or used for political purposes. And central and local authorities are mostly unaware or ignorant. Next slide, please. On the other hand, great majority of NGOs in developing countries don't have the required professional infrastructure. To be an NGO, you have to have a professional infrastructure. Not everybody can become a member of any NGO. Environmental awareness programs don't take place in formal training. The gap between disciplines is growing bigger, and some of them tend to create monopolies. Scientists never have necessary funds. They suffer. Scientific data also very difficult to obtain, and other relevant information. Next slide, please. Well, then there is still something to be done. A radical change from industrial economy towards ecological economy is needed. On the left-hand side, you see the issues related to industrial economy. We need to do less of the items listed in the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, you are saying ecological economy, and we are asked to do more of the items listed in this right-hand side column. I am not going into the details because you have them already. Next slide, please, not to waste the time. Yeah, next slide. Again, next slide, please. Yeah. Now we came to Rio 20. We started at 1972. Now Rio plus 20. Rio indicates 1992. After 1992, 20 years passed, but let's see what happened. Rio plus 20, what they say. Again, under the, okay, Rio plus, okay, a little bit. It has focused on preparing clear documents with practical measures for implementing sustainable development. Again, on paper, it looks very handsome, this sentence. But in real world, did it do anything? We'll see. Next slide, please. Rio Plus 20 conference adoptive innovative guidelines on green economy policies. I will come back to that at the end of my presentation. And put in a place a strategy for financing sustainable development. This green economy you will hear very often nowadays. So governments adopted a 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns. There is one more thing which is very important here, because it covers also, I think it should cover Cyprus as well. The conference focused on thematic areas such as energy, food security, oceans, and cities, and decided to convene a third international conference on small island developing states in 2014. I don't know if anything done in Cyprus for that. Next slide, please. Governments or their representatives, civil societies, agreed on renewing commitments to sustainable development and ensure the promotion of an economically, socially, and environmentally sustainable future. Accordingly, the world is getting power and power. So poverty eradication, sustainable patterns of consumption and production, protecting and managing the natural resources as well as natural processes are defined among the most significant issues. Next slide, please. So all the participating countries reaffirmed as the following. They decided continue promoting sustained and equitable economic growth, creating greater opportunities for all, reducing inequalities, I don't know how, raising basic standards of living, fostering equitable social development, promoting integrated and sustainable management of natural resources and ecosystems, in addition to ecosystem conservation, regeneration, restoration, and resilience became new challenges. Yes, but since 2012, I don't know if anything done about it. We keep saying the same things over and over, but still no solid outcome. Next slide, please. So they sort of reaffirmed their commitments to governments during Rio Plus 20, fully implement the Rio Declaration, the program for further implementation of Agenda 21, Johannesburg Plan of Implementation on Sustainable Development. This is called Johannesburg Declaration. Barbados Program of Action, Mauritius Strategy for the further implementation of Small Islands Development Strategy. Implementation of the Program of Action for the Least Developed Countries. This is Istanbul Program of Action. So many programs, it's boring, isn't it? The Almaty Program of Action addressing, there is a very special issue here. This is the landlocked developing countries. Developing, but also surrounded by other countries. No opening anywhere.
Yes.
Very, very, very interesting issue for me, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
So next, sorry?
Oh, it's okay. I'm listening to you. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please. So, but there are various approaches, visions, models, tools available to each country, as long as we know how to use them. Accordingly, it's emphasized that Rio 2020, the next one now, after Rio plus 20, so this is Rio plus 40, 2020. According to the Rio plus 20, this one should contribute to eradicating again poverty. Keep repeating the same thing, nothing happens. Poverty sustains itself. Sustained economic growth, again, big question mark. Enhanced social inclusion, again, I don't know. Improved human welfare. It is written on the official document. That's why I'm saying. Improved, sorry, I will make a small explanation here, especially for the students. Don't believe everything if it looks nice on the printed papers, on decorated files. Just question if it is true or not. Improved human welfare and create opportunities for employment and decent work for all. Maintain the healthy functioning of the Earth's ecosystems.
But I consider that if the population growth increases like that, it's not easy to provide all these contributions. Maybe it will not be easy to carry out or implement them.
Exactly, and you all know, I think, food crisis is very close. We are expecting a huge food crisis, and another crisis. Yeah, I have to make some explanation here as well. The war, unfortunate war between Russia and Ukraine, created energy crisis now. And last year, in November, in Glasgow, there was a meeting where coal burning, it was decided to stop coal burning as energy source. But then now they are trying to go back to coal burning because the whole Europe is suffering loss of energy source. Interesting, isn't it? Another one, before I continue, perhaps if you, I don't know if anybody has gone to Scotland, beautiful green hills, but they are not beautiful, they are awful. Because once to overcome the food crisis, they had to cut all the forests. Only very few forest area remain today in Scotland. But underneath the soil, there is huge sources of torf area.
Okay.
Yeah. And emissions of carbon dioxide from the torf surface is so high, and there are no trees to absorb it. You see, sometimes we are doing something to feed ourselves, but then the result is something unexpected. So
we have constructed buildings on the agricultural lands.
Yes, exactly. Now my okay. Now, okay. Next slide, please. Green economy policies in context of sustainable development and poverty eradication be consistent with international law. Again, you see, there are some connections between existing laws and some new policies. We have to understand if it is good for us, if not. We must not sign everything presented to us, but our governments, especially if we are not fully aware of the whole thing, we are signing everything but doing nothing. Respect each country's national rights over their natural resources. I don't know. It's all international bodies operating on the natural resources of the countries, of especially developing countries. Be supported by an enabling environment and well-functioning institutions at all levels. And don't forget the participation of stakeholders, which are the important parts of the public. Promote sustained and inclusive economic growth, foster innovation, and provide opportunities, benefits, and empowerment for all. Respect human rights. Okay, next slide, please. To meet the needs of developing countries, particularly those in special situations, contribute to closing technology gaps between developed and developing countries. There is a huge gap between those two. Reduce the technological dependence of developing countries because they depend on developed countries for every technological issue. Enhance the welfare of indigenous people. Avoid endangering cultural heritage, practices, and traditional knowledge. This is very important, and there are so many things we can learn from the cultural heritage, traditions, practices. Enhance the welfare of women, children, youth, persons with disabilities, farmers, fisher folks, and those working in small and medium-sized enterprises. Mobilize the full potential and ensure the equal contribution of both women and men. Promote sustainable consumption and production patterns. Next, please. So accordingly, there was a framework established for follow-up process. Everything we explained so far was covered by this framework, such as poverty eradication, food security and nutrition, and sustainable agriculture, water and sanitation, energy, sustainable tourism, sustainable transport, sustainable cities and human settlements, health and population, promoting full and productive employment, decent work for all, and social protection. Next slide, please. Well, small island developing states, again, you see, it always keeps its place in the agenda. Least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, Africa, disaster risk reduction, climate change. I told you the relation between sustainability and climate change at the beginning. We will come back to that. Forest, biodiversity, desertification, land degradation and drought, mountains, chemicals and waste, sustainable consumption and production. Next slide, please. Mining. Mining is everywhere nowadays, isn't it? They are digging everywhere. Education, gender equality for women's empowerment. When I read such a thing, I want to laugh because there is no such thing. Sustainable development goals, means of implementation, finance, technology, capacity building, trade. They look nice, so nice, but they all failed. Now we are questioning why Rio failed in the past. This is past now.
Yeah.
Yeah, another one is coming this year. I think in June 2022. So why it has failed and how can we do something better this time? Since 2000 alone, forests equivalent in size to the landmass of Germany have been lost. But even more today, because last year's are not included. 80% of world's fish stocks have collapsed. Frightening, isn't it?
It is.
Gobi Desert is growing by 10,000 square kilometers a year. Well, unsustainable use of natural resources will be the biggest challenge facing mankind in the 21st century. Next slide. Yeah. So the reason, what is the reason why we haven't done better since 1992 and what needs to be done for correction now? It's not very difficult to understand why not. The because the major problem in the past years has been the failure of governments to implement properly their commitments from Rio and Johannesburg. As I said 2 slides ago, that we sign everything, but we don't do anything. First, there has been a lack of domestic legislation to support the Rio Principles and Convention. Convention is very strict. Once you sign it, you have to obey the regulation. But there is no domestic legislation. It has to go through every signing countries, parliaments, and become a local law then. But there is no such thing. Very often it sort of remains on paper as an international legislation. And you can't do anything if you don't have the local regulation and law to do something. It's a very important tool. Second, there was a lack of credible and independent international power to monitor. There is no such power. And we should think if there should be or not, because this power can be also used for some other purpose. And finally, the international community, although they are writing beautiful words and sentences, they failed to convert the original Rio agenda into an understandable language that other countries can do something about it. It's so complicated. Next slide, please. Now we are at the position of Earth Summit 2022 issues. Again, the same things.
Sustainable development.
Tired of this time governance came. That means not government, but how to manage the things. Sustainable development, international negotiation, keep talking, that means stakeholder participation, climate change, adaptation, mitigation, global partnership, means of implementation, blah, 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 blah. Next slide, please. Now we came to climate change. I don't know if we have enough time.
We have.
Not much left. The United Nations Framework Convention. Convention is very important word. It sort of ties your hands. You have to obey the rules brought by convention. Climate change entered into force on March 21st, 1994. All related countries, 197, ratified. They agreed. They put their signature on it. Next, please. Well, we'll see later what happens, although they signed. As a matter of fact, history of climate change goes back to the 19th century. That John Tyndall showed carbon dioxide absorbs heat. Nowadays, we call it greenhouse effect. Charles David Keeling found that peak levels of carbon dioxide rising every year. By the late 1800s, another scientist tried to calculate the amount of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere. Next, please. It was during the 1980s the evident changes of global warming were seen on the Earth's surface. As you all know, melting ice caps or melting permafrost soils. It was a time when people woke to alarm bells and they started realizing that climate change was turning into a reality. But on the other hand, some people deny it. They don't believe it. They say it's nonsense, that nothing is changing. I told you at the beginning, change is inevitable. Of course, it has changed during the whole time, but it depends on our ability to adapt the change. In 1988, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, was set up by the United Nations, another body, you see, and then to assess the change climate change on the planet in a comprehensive manner. I don't know how they did it. They didn't do anything, as a matter of fact. Next slide, please. In 1992, heads of 100, president, as a matter of fact, 107 countries met at Rio during Rio meeting summit in Brazil, adopted a series of environmental agreements, including UNFCCC framework that is in effect today, even today. The international treaty aimed to prevent dangerous human interference with Earth's climate system. Here, I want to say one more thing, as I remember now. People very often use climate and weather as same concept. They are totally different things. So I would ask the students to try to understand it a little bit.
Okay.
Time is limited, but they are different things. So the pact, they produced a pact, another agreement. So it set no limits on greenhouse gases. If there is no limit, what we are talking about? Huh? There was no limit. So they decided, meet again, so future agreements, protocols, and to set binding emissions to targets. Waste of time. So accordingly, participating countries meet annually. Every year they meet. This is called Conference of Parties, COP, to assess their progress. Every year, imagine, since 1992. Next slide, please. Then comes Kyoto Protocol. That was, again, an initiative of United Nations to bring certain strict rules. Kyoto Protocol was adopted in 1997, called 41 countries and EU to commit to reducing the emission of greenhouse gases to below 5.2% by 2012. It never happened. Next slide, please. After the United States stopped the implementation of Kyoto Protocol, denied climate change, and withdrew its signature from the protocol. Then IPCC released a report noting that global warming is getting very high levels, and damaging impacts are very close. So now it's so funny. COP parties during the 15th session, 15 times they met of UNFCCC, and here United States of America and China, India, South Africa, Brazil, they are called themselves basic countries, came up with a draft, another one. This is Copenhagen Accord. One gets crazy among all those agreements, accords, protocols, whatever they are. So they decided for the continuation of Kyoto Protocol. Next slide, please. Then came Paris Agreement, because all the past ones failed. All of them failed. They did not work effectively. So countries entered yet another agreement to mitigate climate change. In 2016, again, the same countries signed their commitment to Paris Climate Agreement. Paris Climate Agreement was founded on the need to prevent global temperatures from rising beyond 2 centigrade degree, which is considered as a critical limit. Under the agreement, each country has the responsibility of determining, planning, regularly reporting on the mechanisms. Next slide, please. Well, then as young girl came up into the agenda of the world, in August 2018, Greta Thunberg, a Swedish 15-year-old climate activist, began protesting in front of the Swedish parliament, holding the sign "School Strike for Climate" to raise awareness and pressure in relation with Paris Agreement. During UN Climate Action Summit in the United States, August 2019, it was further reinforced, not 2 centigrade degree, but 1.5 centigrade degree is the socially, economically, politically, and scientifically safe limit to effectively control global warming by the end of the century. A deadline was set as 2050. Next, please. Well, before Industrial Revolution, the average amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was 280 ppm. In 1958, the average rose to 315 ppm. As of 2019, it was this time 409.8 ppm. This is the highest level in the past 800,000 years. Next, please. There is another protocol which is related to ozone layer. Again, so many. As you can see, it has gone under 9 revisions. After 9 revisions, we are not still somewhere. According to climate projections, the ozone layer is expected to return to 1980 levels between 2050 and 2070. Who lives that long to see this? I don't know. Perhaps future generations will change it at all, because it covers such a long time, we cannot see it. Next, please. So, as we are talking about indicators and whatever they are, and for sustainability, they are accepted as useful tools to define if we are doing something sustainable or not. There are some concepts and criteria. Develop a model of indicators useful for indicating community debate on sustainability. Create indicators on reliable baseline information to help in decision-making process. Provide a wide range of measurements on social, cultural, and environmental health and vitality. Still not very clear, huh? Next, please. Well, what is the origin of this indicator development process? After the Global Tomorrow Coalition Conference in Seattle, 1990, 99 indicators in 11 categories were developed. These were resource consumption, economy, natural environment, population, social environment. You see, it covers everything. But then they decide 2 years later on 40 indicators in 4 categories, which were environment, population and resources, economy, culture and society. Next, please. So there should be some principles for creating indicators. There are more, but I could only have this much because I have time limits here, time limitation. We can use existing data. Each data set is evaluated in relation to its significance and connection to sustainability. But sometimes existing data is not sufficient, so we have to improve existing data and add new ones. Data gathering is the vital aspect of it. Re-evaluate underlying assumptions. Some assumptions, some things, perhaps some ideas, some assumptions might be outdated, too old, or contrary to sustainability, not sustainable at all. We have to integrate long-term focus with short-term change, relate indicators to the individuals, focus on indicators which gave some kind of per capita measure, how much water we use, how much electricity we use, how much time we spend on going from home to work, such things. Identify direction of sustainability. Using these indicators, are we moving towards or away from sustainability? Due to interrelated nature of sustainability, develop indicators as an integrated, holistic system and determine the linkages. Next, please. So there are some ecological principles. I will not go into detail, but very shortly talk about that. Ecological principles for sustainable life. We are all expecting to have a sustainable life. Huh? A healthy ecosystem and natural environment is the foundation for all of our activities. And the natural environment, this is our life support system. This is the basis for everything. For healthy world, healthy economy, healthy society, healthy quality of life. Next, please. Accordingly, we must protect, preserve, and restore natural environment by utilizing true cost pricing to evaluate a course of action. We move towards long-term economic viability and sustainability without compromising our quality of life. So we have to consider ecological plus economic sustainability. Next, please. We have to establish true cost pricing as a basis of economic viability. Local production of food, goods, and services creates good jobs in local businesses, reduces dependency on imports, allows economic wealth to be recycled, provides security in case of emergency, makes cities self-sufficient for fresh and less expensive food, contributes the functional green of the urban areas, improves social relations through business-customer relations. Well, we have learned something. We have learned some lessons from the pandemic period, how important these issues were. Next slide, please. We have to support local agriculture and local businesses, products and services. As again, I want to remind you the pandemic period, it also showed how important that was. Next, please. We need to develop clustered, mixed-use, pedestrian-oriented ecological communities. Instead of people, information, materials, and services are expected to move for long-term sustainability. They are all also moving like this. Huh? After, as with the pandemic period, we started staying home, and the services, material, information started going around. Clean and quiet transportation solutions will reduce air and noise pollution, time consumed in transportation, traveling expenses, accident, loss of lives, and injuries. Advanced communication systems, they are already in use. They will develop in the future. Such systems will permit large businesses to decentralize into small local branch and even home offices. Production is to be evaluated on the basis of efficiency, energy, and raw material. Next, please. We have to utilize advanced transportation, communication, and production systems. Efforts need to be concentrated towards the use of conservation technologies and practices to reduce consumption of energy, water, and materials. Next, please. Maximize conservation and develop renewable resources. Stop dumping and start recycling, reusing everything. Support development of industries using recycled materials in order to change our farming, manufacturing, packaging, waste disposal, transportation, energy system to non-polluting technologies, and start using renewable resources. We must start immediately. Next slide, please. Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, the Green Deal, it is a roadmap to sustainable economies. This is very new. It aims having cleaner products and cleaner trade. Well, I don't know if they are going to succeed anything, but let's see what it aims. It presents a roadmap for making EU's economy sustainable. Although it looks like it covers EU, but it covers every country, every region that have relation with EU. EU's economy sustainable by turning climate and environmental challenges into opportunities. That's what I told you, adaptability at the beginning. Across all policy areas and making transition just and inclusive for all. It outlines, this part is important, investments needed and financing tools available, and explains how to ensure a just and inclusive transition. European Green Deal covers all sectors of economy, notably transport, energy, agriculture, buildings, and industries such as steel, cement, ICT, information communication technology, textiles, and chemicals. Next slide, please. You see timeline of EU Green Deal here. I will not go into the detail, but each of these, you can see them in blue, can be used as keywords for future, what will happen, what is inside, and what sort of cooperation programs will be launched. So it started with the presentation of European Green Deal. Then it was followed then by the European Green Deal investment plan and the transition mechanism. Then European climate law proposed, and it was open to the public, all parties, local communities, civil society, business, schools, European Climate Pact. Then it was followed by European Industrial Strategy, a plan for a future-ready economy. It is followed by Circular Economy Action Plan, focusing on sustainable resource use. And this one is from farm to fork, from field to our dining table, to make food systems more sustainable. The other one was EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, to protect the fragile natural resources. EU strategies for energy system integration and hydrogen. Next slide, please. Climate 2030 Climate Target Plan was presented. Renovation wave came. Methane is going to be a huge problem. New strategy will be developed for that. Chemicals strategy for sustainability. Offshore renewable energy. European Climate Pact. European Battery Alliance. New European Bauhaus. Organic Action Plan. Zero Pollution Action Plan. New European Bauhaus. New actions for funding. Proposals to stop deforestation, innovative sustainable waste management, and make soils healthy. Finally, on March 2022, proposal for regulation on eco-design for sustainable products, EU strategy for sustainable and circular textiles, revision of the construction products regulation. You see, there is a roadmap. I think scientists, academicians, and business people should go and see what is inside, what are the limitations, what are the opportunities in order to continue doing work or understanding what EU is up to. Well, that concludes my presentation. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for listening, for your attention.
I thank you very much for your kindly contribution and challenging presentation. I also agree with you. I integrated the concept of sustainability into my studies, and still I read and I try to understand many things, but I think it's not easy nowadays just to carry out the concept of sustainability in most of areas. For example, I consider that as long as the population growth increases in the world, implementation of the sustainability in many sectors will not be easy. On the other hand, we live in such a way that based on consumption. So we need to change the traditional lifestyle based on consumption pattern towards the production patterns, maybe. By this way, maybe it will be easy. Maybe it will be easy for us to adapt the changing conditions.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you.
So thank you very much. I think I see that there is no any question, and thank you very much for your kindly contribution once again.
Thank you very much.
I hope to see you and talk to you soon.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure being with you. I hope it gives some idea to your students.
Of course, because at least they learn it, they are going to learn, they are going to integrate the concept of sustainability in their design and planning works in future. Mm-hmm. Because of that, they have to learn this concept. Based on the sustainability, new concepts emerge. For example, like the concept of resilience. Yeah. But if someone learns the concept of sustainability, it will be easy for them to learn the concept of resilience as well. Because of that, I teach them, and this has been a great opportunity for them to listen to the concept of sustainability from a challenging professor in Turkey at international level.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. See you soon then.
No, thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
The future belongs to the curious. This is an act of discovery. Come and experience it with us in Aracad and discover your creative potential. This is your path. This is your journey. You decide how it's going to be. Time to free your curiosity that's always in you. Come and experience it with us in Aracad and discover your creative potential.